Hi there, I'm joined today by Colin Lynch, and Colin is head of global real estate at TD Asset Management. He's also someone that I met during a Black History Month event and just was so fascinated by his story and what he's doing and where he's come from and where he's going. I thought it would be really fantastic to have a conversation and learn a little bit more about Colin. So Colin, thank you for joining me. Um, Maybe share with us a little bit of the story that you shared at that Black History Month event about your journey. I mean, you wanted to be a musician. You've got the piano behind you in the background there. So it's obvious it's still an important part of your life, but you've really had an interesting life. So maybe you can just share a little bit of that with us.
Well, first off, thank you for having me here, Pam. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, it's been a journey, and it started with music. I've had a passion for music for my whole life, but growing up, that passion I got to express by joining a number of organizations, ensembles, symphony orchestras, and jazz ensembles, doing solo piano performances, and it got to the point where I did about 100 performances a year. And if you were to ask me in grade 10 or 11 what am I going to do for the rest of my life, I would have said, good chance I'd be doing something in music. But I decided at the end of high school to go explore something else. And so I did. And that something else was business with a sidebar to history, which I also have a passion for. But music's never left me. And so over the years, I've been, whether giving performances in different contexts, composing music, sitting on orchestra boards, or also just generally helping out in the artistic sector. It's been a big passion area for me. So my life has migrated through a number of different areas. Started with music. I've had a passion for everything from commercial aviation. I mentioned history, but now I'm in real estate and doing investments, but also have had a big passion for the community as well. And I think that's one of the lessons I've taken, which is life's better living when you have a passion for what you're doing and believe that you're actually making a positive impact on the world through what you're doing. Life's just a lot more enjoyable that way.
You know, when I talk to students, I always like to tell them to not be so focused on one goal that they might miss opportunities that come their way. Um, Sometimes don't ever say, I'm never going to do this, or don't close your eyes to opportunities that might take you in a completely different direction than what you thought you might do. And you've obviously lived your life exactly like that,
Well, yeah,
right?
that's brilliant advice. I really do believe in that. I think a lot of individuals when they're born and you're 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6 years old, and your vision of what you can actually accomplish in life is unlimited. And then you sort of grow older and older, and what ends up happening, you begin seeing things. You begin sort of people may say something to you, and then you begin sort of limiting that potential. And it's a combination of what society might say, what other people might say, and a combination of what you might think. And you get to a point where you've limited yourself so much that you feel like you're in this box, and the boundaries of the box are closing in incrementally and incrementally. And for me, I've never wanted to be in that spot. I've always wanted to keep the naivety of a young child to believe that I can do sort of anything. I can figure it out. I can, it's not going to be easy, but I can figure it out. And nothing is beyond the potential of something I can actually do.
And you've done a couple of different degrees, if I remember correctly, too, right? You get one degree and then you start doing something else. I can't remember exactly what they were, though, Colin.
Yeah, so while in high school, I completed the ARCT, which is a music, and this one was a piano teaching from Royal Conservatory, and then I went to Queens, and I guess technically I finished that ARCT during my first year at Queens, and then I was enrolled in Bachelor of Commerce, and then by the end of my first year, I said I love history, so I'm going to do a Bachelor of Arts in history too, and so. I went to Kingston. I was from Toronto. I wanted to get out of Kingston within 4 years. So I ended up doing the Bachelor of Arts and the Bachelor of Commerce as well within the 4 years. And then I had this desire to go to Harvard. And so I got into the MBA program. And so that ended up being the fourth piece of paper. And then I also got into the JD program, which is the law program. And then I spent an interminable amount of time figuring out whether I should do it, decided not to. So I guess if I decided to have done it, I could have ended up with five pieces of paper, but I think I ended up with four and figured that was enough.
And then in addition to your business and your schooling, you also have done worked in the community and were really involved with the City of Toronto. I think it was Mayor Tory's campaign, wasn't it?
Yes,
And
yes.
housing. And can you maybe tell us about that side of your life as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly think that overall government plays a critical role in society, right? And I guess that point is less obvious now, given the pandemic and the critical role that government plays, not just directly through what we're seeing overall, whether it's the protections or the vaccines, but if I look indirectly, the hospitals and the public health authorities and all the doctors and the entirety of the healthcare system, et cetera. So I think that's a good case in point for the important role that government plays. So for me, the helping politicians that I sort of believed in was always a passion. My mom was for 30 years, I believe, a civil servant working for for the federal government. So maybe that was a little bit of how I got a little bit of that passion. But in 2014, John Tory to me struck me as somebody that was very smart, very intelligent, really had a passion for the city, and it came from what I could tell from a good place. And in all candor, I didn't expect him to win that campaign. I mean, when I was asked to get involved in January 2014, the election was in October. I think the polling had him at 2 to 3%. And so to me, that was, I just believed that, relative to what was in place at the time, uh, this was a good step forward. So I just got involved. And so 10 months later, he ended up winning. Um, and then came a call that asked me to consider, putting my name forward for the Toronto Community Housing Corp. And I think most of us know TCHC has been through its share of troubles over the years and lots of issues to work out. And so I went into that eyes wide open. But I went into it because TCHC has such a tremendous impact on the city of Toronto. Over 110,000 residents, and I'd say it's in the over in the five figures the number of residents that need help beyond just housing that live in TCHC. And so when you look at impact and the potential to have a tremendous positive impact on the lives of vulnerable individuals, on senior citizens, on new Canadians, on individuals that are suffering with mental health issues. It's hard to find a better organization to have a significant positive impact on directly. So I said yes, and spent the next 4 years quite heavily involved in TCHC.
Well, I mean, I always say, you know, if you don't have adequate housing, you really can't. Nothing else. Everything flows from having housing. Kids don't function well at school. People can't find work. If you don't have adequate housing, you're unable to succeed. It leads people into the criminal justice system. There's so many spin-offs, and investments in housing are so important for investments in people's lives, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly it. There's so many stats that come to mind from my time at TCHC. The waiting list to get into TCHC, 250,000 people. When you look at the revitalization progress, why is that so important? Well, there is a community that I toured near Jane and Finch, and walked through that community. Think housing, townhomes, and apartments, and walked through that community, and I toured apartments that I was shocked that in Canada we were having people living in those conditions. And in all candor, I went outside and was able to tear off pieces of brick from people's homes, like literally. Like I never thought possible one could tear off pieces of brick, and that's because of the water penetration. But it goes back to the building quality, and so when you look at that construct, and that community had ended the tour at this wall, and that wall had doves, and the doves were represented individuals that were shot and killed in that community, just that community. And there were 15 or 16 doves on that wall, and two or three were freshly painted. Um, that goes to your point that having a safe, secure, and not just safe in terms of criminal activity, safe in terms of actually living in a property that's actually safe, is so critical to the ability to be productive, contributing members of society.
Well, good for you for doing what you did there for 4 years, because I know you made some transformational changes. So now you work in investment banking. There's not a lot of diversity in investment banking, and there's a lack of diversity, quite frankly, in business in Canada in general. As a woman, I see it. As a Black man, I'm sure you've seen it when you walk into a room and you're looking around the room. I was listening to the Barack Obama, Bruce Springsteen podcast recently. I don't know if you've listened to it, but Bruce Springsteen was talking about touring with Clarence Clemens, and Clarence was the only Black man in the band. And they played their first concert in the Ivory Coast. And Bruce said he looked out at every face. It was just a sea of Black faces. And Clarence walked over to him and said, "This is what I see every single night." So normally the tables were reversed, right? Where Clarence is looking out at a white crowd. So, how challenging has that been for you, Colin, in your career? And also, I know that you're doing a lot of work to try and increase that diversity in our country. So maybe you can chat a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So your first off, that's an interesting analogy there. That's very, very interesting. Second, you're right. The spaces I've inhabited from a career perspective have been spaces that you haven't seen a lot of diversity. And so, how have I personally tried to navigate that? Candidly, I have tried to take what would be a negative and turn it into a positive. So, as an example, when I went to undergrad, I think that there were maybe 30 Black students on campus of maybe 20,000 people. So I sort of had the view that, look, I'm quasi famous. Everybody knows who I am, So I try to spin it around. Certainly in the iBanking world, that world needs help as it relates to gender diversity, which is atrocious. The environment and the culture is atrocious from that perspective. And from an ethnic diversity perspective, a long way to go. I have tried to be an advocate for change internally. I've called stuff out, and that's sometimes gotten blowback for calling stuff out, but I've called stuff out. But I've also tried to be an exemplar in terms of building teams, building an approach that shows that it is better to do things in a diverse way. As an example, the team that I have, and we're a real estate investments team, and we sit at the intersection of a commercial real estate world and the asset management world, neither of which would receive awards for being diverse. So when we show up as a team, as a diverse team of females and males from a variety of different backgrounds, and we go to conferences where there are thousands of people and there's only one background, and when 95% of the participants are male, just showing up alone, uh, you know, presents a message. But then we actually require everybody that we work with, that we partner with, to complete a diversity and inclusion survey to specify who's in what roles by gender and by background. And just by requiring that to be completed, you not only just open the conversation on diversity, but you also begin to create change within the industry. And so we've done that, but also even in the organization I've worked for, I've led an initiative to help us improve, which has involved surveying other asset management firms and presenting recommendations, and then working to implement those recommendations around recruiting, development, around mentorship and sponsorship, and retention. And those key pieces, retention, sponsorship, mentorship, um, and promotion, tend to be missed when we talk about diversity in the corporate world. The focus tends to be on get junior people in. But after 30 years of that focus and not seeing a ton of significant change, we need to broaden that focus to what happens after those junior people come through the door.
And you and I met through the event. It was the Black mentorship. That's
Yes.
Evangeline's focus is on mentorship, and something that is really, really important, to how to ensure that we do have people that are rising through the ranks in business and in government and wherever you're working, right?
Mhm.
I want to talk about the Black Opportunity Fund. Maybe could you tell us a little bit about that? You're the, I think, one of the co-founders, right?
Yes, that's right. And it has been an absolute journey and labor of love. But what is it? So it is an initiative to raise $1.5 billion as a permanent pool of capital to simply put support Black charities, nonprofits, businesses, and entrepreneurs. Why? There are many phenomenal organizations doing great work. What we have seen is that they are significantly subscale and under resourced. They run into systemic barriers and, in some cases, specific anti Black barriers. And we want to sort of help those organizations to overcome them. And so we recognize it's not, we won't solve all the challenges with a pool of capital, but we can certainly help those organizations to do so. It's a national initiative, so focused right across the country. We really believe intersectionality is important. In many respects, Black females have been underrepresented, underconsulted, underserved, and ditto for members of the LGBTQ2 plus community. And so we have a specific intent to not just listen to those individuals, but to reflect what we hear and how the Black Opportunity Fund seeks to serve, to represent those individuals, but also to ensure that the Black Opportunity Fund itself has an appropriate constitution that represents the entirety of the Black community. And that's really important. We've made tremendous progress so far. Made a couple big announcements last week. We've got more to come in terms of more funding partnerships, and we have a board that we're going to announce and an executive director that we're going to announce during the month of March. And there's over 250 people volunteering on this, which is one of the most inspiring pieces. In addition to that, we've had consultations with over 1,000 individuals, organizations within the Black community to really hear, so that what we're working on actually responds to a need that we've heard in the Black community.
Wow. You're amazing, Colin. I'm every time I talk to you and I hear you speak, I'm just so impressed with not just with what you've done, but I think more importantly, your attitude and you've obviously got a commitment to public service and making sure that you're making our country the best that it can be. So thank you. I could talk to you for hours, but I think we probably should wrap it up. So thank you so much for your time, Colin.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.